Hi, welcome back to my channel. And today I'm celebrating 200 subscribers. 206 actually. I'm so grateful for everyone who's been subscribing, who's been commenting on the videos. I always appreciate your comment. So thanks for your support, it's fantastic. Now, it's become a tradition on this channel that whenever I reach a landmark like 200, I do a very silly, nostalgic video looking back at my youth, TV or cult media of my youth. And today I'm going to look back at my top 10 telefantasy actors. Now, for those of you out there who aren't nerds, what are you doing here? But if you aren't a nerd, telefantasy basically is that genre of television that deals with science fiction, horror, fantasy, superheroes, right? And I'm picking 10 different programs and one actor from each of those programs to give me a list of the 10 best telefantasy actors. I'm kicking off with lovely Linda Carter. Yes, Wonder Woman. Do you remember that series in the late 70s? In the days when superheroes were fun, sort of light-hearted drama shows. Do you remember those? I loved Linda Carter, but I have to say I blame the 1970s, the late 70s, for my sexuality. Let me explain. There I am, a young lad, and on Doctor Who, there's Louise Jameson playing Leela, a tough, high-kicking Amazonian warrior in leopard skins. Then there's Caroline Munro in At the Earth's Core, a tough Amazonian savage in leopard skins near the centre of the Earth with dinosaurs. And then there's Linda Carter, a tough woman from Amazonia, high-kicking and beating guys up, in a red basque and blue hot pants and kinky boots. What chance did I have? That was my sexuality determined for the rest of my life. It wasn't fair. I like Linda Carter. She approaches the role with lightness, a nice twinkle in her eye. She's having a bit of fun. She invested it with a bit of humour. I find these superhero films these days, they're so portentous, aren't they? They're so serious. I think superhero films should be treated as Linda Carter treats it, as a bit of light drama. Don't, take away from the fun and the fantasy of it, but have a bit of fun with it. And that's why at number 9, I've also picked Adam West as Batman. Yes, I liked Adam West as Batman, and he's still my favourite Batman because he made it fun. I love the way that, like Linda Carter, he gently takes the piss out of it, but he does it in a very sort of Vincent Price type way, so that he's very particular. He's very serious, like over serious, and very particular in his diction and the way he says things. Robin, we must fight. And all this, it's kind of almost cod Shakespearean way of saying things, and it's just beautifully done. And I really love that Batman series. I'm still very fond of it. I love the sort of day-glow 60s comic book look of it. That's my kind of superhero stuff. This new era where it's all very serious and portentous and every film is 2.5 hours long, I can't be doing with it. So that's my superhero choices. At number 8, Darren McGavin. Do you know where I'm going with this? Kolchak the Night Stalker. Does anyone remember this series? It came out in the mid-70s. There were 2 TV movies written by Richard Matheson. One was called Kolchak the Night Stalker. The second one was called Kolchak the Night Strangler. And basically, it's Columbo against vampires or the supernatural. So instead of Columbo investigating a murder, you've got Columbo investigating vampires and werewolves and zombies. It was doomed to failure, and I don't think it went past 2 seasons. And some of the later episodes are pretty bad, actually. But I enjoyed it. It was repeated in the 80s, and I had a great time watching it, being a bit of a horror fan. Darren McGavin is one of those American actors who's just the right side of being annoying, right? He's like Richard Dreyfuss. He's a good actor, but you could, if you met him in public, you'd probably want to punch him in the face, But he's perfect here as this kind of journalist who wears a sort of bow hat because he's part of the press and he's a bit eccentric, right? So he wears a bow hat and a little bow tie, I think. And he's like this crusading journalist, right? Probably the last time you could do the kind of crusading journalist story where a journalist is actually trying to find out the truth. I think these days people would be more on the side of the vampire. Bit of satire. But yes, that was the idea, that he went and investigated stories and then he found out that it was really a vampire or someone from, the undead. It was a kind of precursor of the X-Files, but a bit more light-hearted and a bit more fun. My 7th choice, now I'm really shoehorning in someone here. I just wanted to talk a little bit about Ian Cuthbertson. Ian Cuthbertson was a wonderful very fruity Scottish actor. And he often played villains because he had a style about him that he was quite imposing looking at it, staring eyes, but he was always laughing. Ian Cuthbertson, yes. And he had, this wonderful, broad Scots accent. And he's very good as the villain in Children of the Stones, a wonderful children's TV drama. I recently introduced a friend to Children of the Stones, and he'd never seen it before. He's in his 30s, and he said, it's terrifying. And I thought, that's the result. Great. It's still a great series. Cuthbertson isn't actually in it very much. He's only in it towards the end, really. But he gives a genuinely effective and enjoyable performance. He's also the villain in ITV's adaptation of Casting the Runes by M.R. James, which is a pretty terrible adaptation. But it's also got Jan Francis in. And it's filmed in Leeds in the winter. And it's quite picturesque in a way. Anyway, number 6. Now, this is a very personal choice. Stephen Moore. Now, Stephen Moore was part of the original cast of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. A lot of people don't know this. Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy did not start life as a book. It was first a radio series transmitted on BBC Radio. Then it was novelised by Douglas Adams. The book did not come first, right? Then came the TV series in the early 80s, and then they made this crappy film later on. Now, Stephen Moore played Marvin the Paranoid Android, I believe, in both the radio series and the TV series. And Marvin the Paranoid Android, for a wimpy, shy, angsty teenager like myself, I loved him. He's this android, and he walks around going, brain the size of a planet, and they ask me to pick up a piece of paper. For some reason, I identified with Marvin the Paranoid Android. I was that kind of teenager. Anyway, I loved him, and I thought Stephen Moore did the voicing of it perfectly. But the other reason I picked Stephen Moore is, in the 80s, Stephen Moore was asked to do the audiobook of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Is there anyone else out there who had these? They were released in the 80s, and Stephen Moore reads the book. So there's Hitchhikers, the whole series actually, Restaurant at the End of the Universe, Life, the Universe and Everything, and the 4th book, So Long and Thanks for the Fish, though I don't think he did the 5th book, Mostly Harmless. Now, the reason I show those is because that is actually my favourite version of Hitchhikers. More than the TV series, more than the book, more than the radio series, and certainly the film. This is my favourite version of Hitchhikers because Stephen Moore's got this wonderful voice. He's got this wonderful, rich, deep English voice, but it's also got a slight sarcasm to it, right? No, not quite serious. It's the perfect reading voice for this stuff, and I think he reads it so well. They're not available anymore, I don't think. I've not been able to track them down on Amazon. If you can track them down, this is the best way to experience Hitchhikers. He reads it brilliantly. At number 5, Diana Rigg from the Avengers. Now, what we've got here is a brilliant, rare case of an actress who was a brilliant actress who started out playing the girl, or the sex interest in a sort of fantasy series. So if you watch the Avengers, she's always dressing up in bondage gear or sex kitten gear or whatever. But it became clear watching the Avengers that Rigg was just way too intelligent for this material. She was so much better, and she became iconic, not just because she was beautiful, but because she had so much character and personality that sort of oozed out of her. You knew that this was really a brilliant actress who was slumming it and having fun with it. Instead of fighting it, she had fun with it and threw herself into it. And she did the same when she became a Bond girl in On Her Majesty's Secret Service. And then she went on to have this fantastic, rich career in film and theatre and television. Wonderful actress. And we were so lucky in a way that her, and before her, Honor Blackman, who was a similar kind of actress, that these really good actresses were playing this kind of, the sidekick part. And in both cases dominated Patrick Macnee, I think. I think Diana Rigg was splendid in this film. Great actress. And another great actress is in my 4th place. Do you remember Jacqueline Pearce in Blake 7? Blake 7 was a sister show to Doctor Who in the late 70s in Britain, but it was made for adults and it was shown about 7 o'clock at night on a weekday night. And it was quite a grim story of these rebels versus the Federation, right? But in the middle of it, they threw in this kind of curveball. They threw in the head of the Federation is this extraordinarily beautiful and striking looking woman who is halfway between a sort of Joan Collins-esque diva and a punk goddess with spiky black hair. And to play this extraordinary character, they got Jacqueline Pearce, who instantly became a kind of sci-fi icon. I can't describe how, in the world of sort of rather staid middle-class drama that you got on BBC television at the time, she was such an unusual figure. She was like something out of Susie and the Banshees, but glam, you know. And Jacqueline Pearce was such an unusual actress with a sort of almost exotic foreign feel to her, and she really enjoyed it. You could tell she was enjoying it and threw herself into it. And there were loads of boys and men up and down the land who suddenly were sort of intoxicated by this, you know. Here was this sort of dominatrix on Thursday night TV. But she was a fantastic presence and a great performance. And there was just so unusual and unique in British television at the time. So now we come to my top three, and in third place is William Shatner, the legend that is William Shatner. Now, I should preface this by saying that I'm not really a Trekkie. I only really like the first Star Trek in the 60s, and the only reason I really like it is William Shatner. I just find him fascinating to watch as an actor. He's so much fun. I mean, later they had Patrick Stewart, and Patrick Stewart, great actor. You know, he was already quite old before he took the part. And he's still going now. He's always looked the same age, Patrick Stewart. Very strange. But he was just a good actor, you know, playing with authority. What I love about Kirk, what I love about William Shatner, is all the things that people criticise. I like his slight overacting. I like his ego. You know, I like when, you know, Kirk's found that some race of people who will go, Landru is life, Landru is everything. And Kirk finds out behind a wall that it's some crappy computer with 5 lights. And then Landru will kind of square up to Kirk and ask him something like, you know, Kirk, what is love? You know, and then Shatner will have the camera full on him, you know, and he goes into one of his fantastic monologues. He goes, love. Love is sharing, caring, giving yourself to another person. You know, and he goes into this wonderful, you know, actorly way he does things. Now, the thing is, it's easy to accuse Shatner of being over the top. But we've got to look here at Telefantasy itself. He came from a theatrical background. He was a Shakespearean actor, so he's got all those theatrical techniques. And he uses them all. So, like, you know, you'll see this with Anthony Hopkins. He'll do this thing where he'll run sentences together. So he'll say, Spock, what are the Klingons doing? Are they going to be here or there? You know, so he'll actually not stop speaking at the end of a sentence, but keep going and then break, so that you're constantly kept listening to what he's saying. And then he'll do his little actually things, like he'll go like that, turn round. I love the way whenever he's kind of being affected by some alien force, he goes. It's really theatrical acting, which Jim Carrey takes the piss out of brilliantly. And so he brings all that to it. And he also brings this ego of wanting it to all be around him. But you see, what you've got to understand here is that telefantasy needs that kind of acting, right? What William Shatner is doing is not wholly selfish. He's investing a huge amount of energy into each scene. And those scripts need energy. A lot of science fiction scripts, it's high concept, it's slightly ridiculous, right? And you're having to sell a lot of exposition. So you need an actor who's going to punch it. They're not going to do it literally or realistically, because that's not going to work. You need someone who's going to take it and really ramp it up. And so that's what I think William Shatner realises that. He's not just doing it egotistically. He knows it needs a bit of oomph, you know, a bit of old theatrical power. And he does it really, really well. And he's complemented beautifully by Leonard Nimoy, whose performance as Spock is very easy to underrate, because he has to keep emotion out of it, he has to keep it all pared down, but still give you authority and still give you the sense of a real person. And Leonard Nimoy does that brilliantly. He's a brilliant foil to William Shatner. And then you get old DeForest Kelley, who's from the Roger Moore school of acting, with his eyebrow raised, Jim. And I love DeForest Kelly, and he's kind of playing this sort of country doctor, you know, the American small town country doctor in space, and he brings in a sort of old fashioned wisdom, and that trio is a brilliant central trio of the original Star Trek, and I just love watching them act together. Though I think sometimes McCoy is a bit horrid to Spock. It gets on my nerves. But anyway, and you know, Kirk always gets the last word, doesn't he? But I adore Shatner's performance. He was never as good in TV series following. He got a bit too eccentric, but I think he's absolutely adorable in Star Trek. My second place is Patrick McGoohan, The Prisoner. Oh my God. I am 51 years of age this month. The Prisoner is still my Bible on the issue of liberty and personal freedom. What's that quote? I won't be pushed, filed, stamped, indexed, briefed, debriefed, or numbered. My life, my mind is my own. Is it my life is my own, my mind is my own? God Almighty, that was a mantra for me when I was a teenager, and it still is. I love The Prisoner. All Prisoner fans like me, the first thing they want to do is tell you what their reading is of The Prisoner. So I'll tell you mine. I was very excited when the guy he wrote it with, whose name just escapes me, Mark Steen, talked about the original influence of it was that the British, after the Second World War, they set up this sort of asylum in the countryside, remote Scottish manor, I think it was, where what they did was, it was set up for people who'd gone deep undercover into the Nazi state during the war and adopted identities. And this was an asylum to kind of break them back in to who they really were. And that's what I think The Village is. It's a kind of asylum to break people back, right? And my reading of the series is that Patrick McGoohan really is number one. He's created it, he's the head of it. But he's put himself into the system to test it. And in so doing, he's created himself as the ultimate rebel. And all the number twos, his civil servants underneath him, can't break him. That's my reading of it, and I'm sticking to it. But Patrick McGoohan, again, is an actor I cannot stop watching. I find him fascinating. I love the way he acts. He was born in America. His parents moved to Ireland, but he was educated in Britain. And all those three cultures congeal and, you know, come together in his acting. He's got this kind of repressed quality of the English gentleman. Every single line is spoken like that, with a smile afterwards. He's got this incredible, everything is repressed, pulled down. You know, no emotion is allowed to show. Every line is dry and clipped. There's, you know, it's almost as though he's holding down this powder keg of fury. And he's like that in every performance he gives, McGoohan, in any programme. Like in David Cronenberg's film The Scanners. It's all very clipped and cold. No emotion. And then, but he has that dynamism, that sort of fury, that sort of, you know, that feel that you get from an American actor. And I just find him absolutely fascinating to watch. He's so good. They were thinking of having him as James Bond. It wouldn't have worked because he was too cold, too repressed. He wasn't fun enough. But as the prisoner, he's absolutely perfect. But number one, it's got to be Tom Baker. Let me show you how much Tom Baker is important to me in my life. I'm going to give you a little tour of my living room. Here we are, I'll bring you around. And there is the wall of doom, all my DVDs and books. Down, and there he is, look. There he is in my fireplace, a little shrine to Tom Baker. That's how much I love the guy from Liverpool who became the guy from The Stars. He was my childhood hero, Tom Baker, for so many reasons. Let me just see if I can line that up for you. Tom Baker is not just a good actor playing a part in Doctor Who. He transformed the character around him. Tom Baker was a guy, he'd grown up working class in Liverpool. He got involved with the church. He originally trained to become a priest. He was an intellectual. He loved Dickens. And he was a great drinker. He used to go drinking with Anthony Hopkins and Geoffrey Bernard and the painter Francis Bacon down the colony rooms in Soho. He was a bohemian. He was a bit of a wild guy, struggling actor. And so he brings all these kind of flavours, these very adult flavours, to this sort of children family series. And he makes the Doctor into this wandering scientist bohemian, an intellect, but who's just having fun. And he's a very cerebral actor, Tom Bacon. He doesn't get enough credit for this. People think he's just an eccentric. That came after his success in Doctor Who. Just like William Shatner after his success in Star Trek. They sort of started living up to their hype as eccentrics. But they were actually brilliant actors who knew what they were doing. And like Shatner, Tom Bacon knows how to invest energy and difference and eccentricity into this role to make it exciting and fun. And to give a flavour of what Tom Baker brought to the part, let's just look at two moments in a story called The Rebos Operation, which I think is particularly brilliant, but not many people like. There's a moment where he's in the console room on his own, and suddenly the doors open mid-flight, and there's this bright white light, and there's this organ music, and a voice goes, "Doctor," and Tom Baker goes, "Yes." Brilliant, absolutely brilliant. That's God calling the Doctor, and Tom Baker's just like, "Yeah, whatever." And then later on in the same story, he's talking to Ian Cuthbertson, who I mentioned earlier on in the video, who plays the sort of rogue, sort of Arthur Daly style character in this story. And this Arthur Daly style character sells planets. He's a bit of a con man, right? And the Doctor, there's all this stuff is going on, and their lives are in danger. But the Doctor just wants to sit down and have a chat with him. He says, and he turns to his companion and he says, "Look, don't worry about all that stuff that's going on outside. When you've been around as long as I have, this is much more fun." And so these two guys start having a chat about this con, and then suddenly, right in the middle of the con, the Tom Baker sort of jocularly says, "What? How did you do that?" And Ian Cuthbertson tries to sort of put him off, and he says, "I'm asking you, Garen." And suddenly, Tom Baker undercuts the complete scene. The comedy just vanishes like that, and suddenly the serious person is right there. I don't think any other actor did that so well in Doctor Who. Tom Baker, you believed everything he did. He created a complete persona that merged with his own personality and created this extraordinary children's hero. I remember growing up in the 70s, and that silhouette of him in the hat and the scarf, when you saw it on, in adverts in the shop or on the side of a cereal packet or whatever, it was so iconic. And there was something about Tom Baker as a children's hero. You loved him, but he was also slightly scary. He was this big, tall, shouting, dominant man with weird looking, he had this bushy hair and these great staring eyes and big teeth. He was kind of frightening. But that was kind of made him even more interesting, even more mysterious. I love Tom. He deserves that place in my fireplace. And he's my favourite telefantasy actor. Let me know the other actors that I've missed. I know there's Gillian Anderson. I know I should have picked Gillian Anderson. I'm sorry about that. I know that some people want me to pick David McCallum and Joanna Lumley from Sapphire and Steel. But let me know your favourites down below. And if you've got any good memories of William Shatner or Tom Baker or Jackie Pierce, let me know. Thanks very much.